Why did emo bands love Victorian style? If you grew up in the 2000s, you probably watched a lot of music videos that looked like this. But in between all the eyeliner and the screaming, you might have missed something. Everyone looked as if they came straight out of the Victorian era. That wasn't an accident. In 2005, the New York Times wrote,
"Rarely since the mid-19th century, when it first became a crowd pleaser, has the Gothic aesthetic gained such a throttle hold on the collective imagination."
When we think of Gothic fashion, what we're actually referring to are the clothes worn by people in the Victorian era when somebody died.
Victorian mourning style was essentially all in black for a long period of time. In other respects, it was very much like regular fashion, so it was quite erotic as well.
That's Dr. Valerie Steele. She's the director of the museum at the Fashion Institute of Technology and the expert on Victorian style, as well as the subcultures it inspired, particularly the rise of goth in the late 70s and early 80s. It emerged as part of punk rock, and the fashion was partially a reaction to the dominant look of the time. That sort of mirrors what happened in the 2000s with emo. If you look at post-9/11 mainstream pop culture, you're probably thinking of this. It's almost literally the opposite of the buttoned-up, dark clothing, and morbid sensibilities of Victorian goth.
So instead of being progressive and liberating for the body, they might be constricting. Even the tight jeans indicates this kind of interest in a different kind of body consciousness.
Consider one of emo's biggest commercial successes, My Chemical Romance. The band's 2005 video for Helena is a near-perfect representation of Victorian goth and emo music.
The obvious interest in death, in coffins, in mourning dress, and setting it in a church, so you've got a kind of religious focus as well. You've got, in a way, with all of that very pale skin, a sort of vampiric referencing also. And you can't tell, is the dead person going to rise from the coffin?
Then there's All That I've Got by The Used in 2006.
Now, the entrance into a book is interesting because, again, a lot of people are just into video games and stuff. And when you talk to people who are goth or emo, they are still into books. And this idea of falling into a book, like into a fairy tale, an alternative reality, is, I think, very important.
Then there's Hawthorne Heights, the band whose name literally comes from 19th century author Nathaniel Hawthorne. The 2004 video for Niki FM shows the band members wearing modern-day outfits, but it's the environment that makes it look so gothic.
I think a key element is the idea of a setting like that being reflective of a mind. So a setting which is crumbling and sort of degenerate and decadent is also like a mind which is falling apart, in a sense, under pressure.
That also applies to music videos in which a beautiful woman dies, and there are a lot of those. So what is it about goth that's so attractive to young people?
I think that goth style, in a way, is kind of a perennial style. It never really disappears because new generations discover it for themselves. It has so much power to it in terms of visual iconography. Black is such a powerful color. It reads as elegant, as kind of charismatic in an excitingly evil and erotic and powerful way. So executioners and nuns and all kinds of people wear black. And you can draw on all those different aspects when you're wearing that.
Goth isn't the only relic from the Victorian period that infiltrated emo. Take the influence of steampunk or fashion inspired by steam-powered machinery in Panic at the Disco's video for The Ballad of Mona Lisa, or 19th century circuses in I Write Sins, Not Tragedies.
You've got a kind of usual mixture of historicizing fashion, very sort of denaturalizing white makeup and pink wigs, etc. So again, it's almost being alien to the sort of normal community where the minister and the bride and groom look sort of normal.
Then there's the setting of the brothel in The Killer's 2004 hit, Mr. Brightside.
Lots of, again, Victoriana, Moulin Rouge feeling with petticoats. And very much a difference between men and women. The men are all, in a way, either the hero or the villain, but the women are sort of aliens from another planet.
And of course, there's all of the strange, fantastical animal references in videos that recall Alice in Wonderland. All of this is related to the Victorian period's romanticization of otherness. Or the idea that things that mainstream society finds repulsive, death, monsters, mental illness, can actually be very attractive. When you're young, you always feel different from everyone else. And really, there's no time in history that illustrates what it's like to feel like a freak surrounded by soulless normal people than the Victorian era. Which means that Victorian and Goth style will probably always be touchstones for future youth subcultures to re-reference. And that tends to scare a lot of people.
Anytime youth subcultures have embraced really different styles, people have gotten all worried and upset, and there's this sort of moral panic that it's a nihilistic style which is death-oriented. And in most cases, it's really not true. It's a very much a cultural style which is drawing on a particular stylistic heritage which has been important for 200 years.
So really, there's no need to panic, unless you're, at the disco.